Now your WSFA First Alert weather with meteorologist Eric Snitil.
Welcome back, everybody. 6:42 on your Christmas Eve morning. Another very active Christmas Eve time frame. You know, I feel like this is a habit that we've run into now over the last few years. More storms, more flooding issues now, particularly as we head into South Alabama. That's where we start off our radar tour. This is WSFA First Alert radar. All of these blue polygons now extending from parts of Covington through Coffee County. That would include Andalusia, Opp, Elba, all the way to about the Enterprise area. Those are flood warnings that we have in effect this morning, and you could clearly see why. More bands of very heavy rainfall now lifting northward here. There's Elba flooding along the P River, has been fairly significant now over the last 24 hours or so. We're seeing a lot of lightning starting to ramp up in this storm just north of Elba, which is kind of getting our attention. This is often a red flag for us that we need to keep an eye on this with regard to severe weather potential. Not only the threat for some heavy rain, we are seeing some relatively weak rotation again. There's Elba, so we're about 6 or 7 miles north of town at this point, roughly splitting about Elba and Jack. That's not enough here to prompt a tornado warning, but it's enough to make us kind of curious here that we need to be paying attention to this. If this tightens up a little bit as it makes its way to the northeast toward Pike County, I think we probably need to watch it. Now, we can also analyze this three-dimensionally, and these things are impressive, particularly for late in December. You know, usually this time of year, you don't have a whole lot of instability. You don't have storms that look all that impressive structurally. This is incredible. Echo tops now up to about 50,000 feet. You could see all of the bands here of very heavy rainfall, and when you have a storm at this depth, obviously, we've got to at least entertain the possibility for some severe weather here, and no doubt we are doing that. One of the things we can do here with First Alert Radar is track not only the rainfall, but the rate of rainfall, just how hard that rain is falling. And when you have a morning like this, when flash flooding is a very real concern, a very real possibility, this is one of those tools here that certainly comes in handy. So if you are on the north side of Elba right now, we know we've got that flooding issue with the P River. We're dealing with rainfall rates now approaching 3 inches an hour, with a very slow-moving band of rain that continues to train over the same areas. Now, we can cross over the county line here. This would take us into very far eastern Covington County, and we're still looking at about 2 to 2.5 inch an hour rainfall rates. So there's a lot going on here, and I think we've probably still got ourselves a fairly long morning for the rest of us. Tornado watches are in effect. So let's have a little fun. Let's talk about the home run derby here at Riverwalk. This starts at 6 o'clock. You know, it's not always just a matter of how strong the guy is who's hitting these home runs. Weather actually plays a part in this. Let's take a cool and relatively dry day. This baseball is not traveling all that far. How about a hot and sticky day? What happens to the baseball then? Well, all else being equal, even though you may be sitting in that heat and humidity and feel like that air is very thick, it's the opposite. The air is actually thinner, which means the baseball is going to end up traveling farther. All we need is a little heat. And it is going to be plenty hot. As this home run derby kicks off around 6 o'clock, we're looking at temperatures in the mid to upper 90s. Now, we will gradually, those of you in the Victoria community, we think the center of circulation here has a decent likelihood of passing just to your west. But because you are still included here in the polygon, we need to respect that. You need to be going into your safe place. Lowest floor, storm shelter, basement, and interior location. We all know the drill here. One thing, again, we want to point out, this is a reminder for all of us. We haven't had a whole lot of severe weather lately. If you've got bicycle helmets, for example, studies have shown that that could be a lifesaver. Put those on the kids, put them on yourself here. Any flying debris that's going to kind of protect the noggin a little bit. School situation across the Enterprise area. Obviously, folks in that part of the world here, we know what's happened in the past with schools and Enterprise and severe weather here. Now, the initial report was that Coffee County schools were set to let out at 1 o'clock. They began that process, but as soon as the tornado warning was issued, they stopped. They started pulling the school buses back. They put all of the kids into a shelter, into a safe part of that school. So while all of the kids are in a safe spot, they're kind of riding things out until the tornado warning is said and done with. So if there was ever any concern, maybe some parents wondering kind of how this all unfolded, they kind of started that process and then were able to kind of retreat once that warning was issued. And those kids are now in a safe spot here, kind of riding things out. With that in mind, we have a new update to pass along to you. Emergency management officials and local law enforcement in Barber, Chambers, Macon, and Pike counties are asking all residents to stay off the roadways unless it's an absolute emergency.
As a department to monitor the situation and just keep people updated. Back to you, Eric.
Thank you very much, Rosanna. We'll continue to go back to Rosanna live in Elba throughout the rest of today in Alabama as we watch that P River flooding as water levels continue to rise. Real quick, I want to make this point here. You kind of heard the pitter-patter of raindrops on Rosanna's microphone. The way flooding will work, particularly with river flooding, just because the rain has stopped does not mean water levels will stop just like that. This is one of those deals where it's often kind of a lag effect where you can get water levels to continue to rise even though the rainfall has perhaps lessened a little bit. So we've got a long way to go for the rest of the morning, and the rainfall is not done, Judd. We'll walk you through the rest of your forecast here in a few minutes.
Back to you.
All right, thank you very much, Rosanna. You stay safe there in the Elba area. Like she mentioned, the old adage of turn around, don't drown, that's not just something we tell people just because, oh, we want to be overly safe, overly cautious. I think this is one of those mornings we need to take that advice and take it very seriously. Let's be honest with ourselves here, folks. This is Christmas Eve morning. This is a very busy day. There's going to be a lot of people who are traveling out on those roadways. Deflategate. Did the New England Patriots knowingly deflate their footballs last Sunday? It's something everybody's talking about, but nobody wants to take responsibility for. But what if the person responsible was Mother Nature? Let me ask you this. You ever notice in the wintertime your tire pressure light coming on in your vehicle? Ever wonder why that's the case and why it happens when it's cold outside? There is a direct connection between temperature and pressure when it comes to those tires. And it's not only tires, it's footballs too. So here's what we did. NFL rules state a football must be inflated between 12.5 and 13.5 pounds. So we took a football and inflated it to 13 pounds even. And we took that measurement in a room with a temperature of 68 degrees. Remember that. It's important. After our measurements, time to take it outside. So in our experiment, we're trying to replicate the exact conditions as best as we can. Game time temperatures at Gillette Stadium were in the low 50s. Current temps right now in the low 50s. We also have the same scattered showers they had at Gillette Stadium. So we're going to take our football, leave it out here for a few hours, and see what happens. There's actually some science to this. Using the ideal gas law, a ball inflated to 13 pounds in a room at 68 degrees should deflate to about 12.06 pounds outside at 51 degrees. The drop in temperature drops the pressure. So based on the math, we would expect our ball to deflate to just over 12 pounds. All right, it is results time. We've let this football now sit outside in the elements for about 2 hours. Let's go ahead and measure the amount of pressure that is left in it. All right, so you remember we started with about 13. We have just a little bit more than 12 pounds of pressure, so we've lost just under a pound after 2 hours out in the elements. Spot on. So what does it all mean? Well, the only variable we cannot assume is the room temperature the footballs were originally measured in at Gillette Stadium. Based on the math, though, it would have taken a room at nearly 90 degrees to account for the 2-pound loss.
Oh, great! Isn't this magical?
Or there's the other theory, that the change in pressure was not because of Mother Nature. A confirmed tornado from the National Weather Service. This obviously takes things up a notch. One of the things that you showed us was that what we call CC, correlation coefficient. This is one of the amazing tools now that we have through the dual polarity element of radar. You've heard us talking about this now through the last, about year or two. A lot of our Alabama radars now being switched over to that. I want to show you that one more time here. So let me flip the switch and bring up what we call correlation coefficient. It's not something we use on air a lot, but boy, this is a handy tool here, particularly in events like this. Now, what correlation coefficient is how similarly shaped raindrops or whatever's falling from that cloud are. If they're very uniform, very similarly shaped, you see CC values that are all fairly high, fairly uniform. When we get this little bullseye here, and this is what we're watching, and I want to kind of highlight this right now. I know it doesn't look like much, but this is an area of much lower CC. This is a sign from radar that it is picking up something that is different, something that is not quite uniform. Now, for that to happen, in a case like this, it's often debris being lofted up into the atmosphere. So think of it like this. You've got a tornado on the ground. It's producing raindrops. It's producing hail. But a lot of those, what we call hydrometeors, are fairly similar shaped in size. So it doesn't show up as anything different. When you start getting debris, you start getting trees and leaves and just anything that a possible tornado wants to throw up into the atmosphere, that's different. The radar knows, all right, something's not right here. Something's different. So I'm going to plot that as a different value. This is a very strong indication for us that we would have had a possible tornado. It might actually get a little bit worse before it gets better. We're talking about more heavy rain moving over the same areas once again. Overall rainfall totals here, not only for the last 6 hours, but over the last 24 hours, have been remarkable. They have been significant. Some of these totals here, where you get into the purples and the blues, extending from Barber County through Pike County through about Andalusia, half a foot to almost a foot of fresh rainfall.
Tonight, federal forecasters are warning about a big change to come this winter, which will feel different from recent years because of El Nino.
You've no doubt heard about it in the news. A super El Nino is set to impact our weather as we head into the winter. Heat waves, blizzards, cold snaps, tornadoes.
But wait a second. Is any of that true? Well, I'm glad you asked.
Let's start from the beginning. El Nino isn't so much a thing as it is a pattern. During a neutral, or La Nina, the opposite of El Nino, trade winds in the equatorial Pacific blow from east to west. This process induces a phenomenon called upwelling, where cool, nutrient-rich water is brought to the surface. This causes cooler sea surface temperatures. But during an El Nino, those trade winds break down or even reverse. That cuts off the upwelling, allowing warmer water to pile up. This warms those sea surface temperatures. So who cares? Well, this process has an impact on large-scale weather patterns, the same ones that affect us here in Alabama. What El Nino typically does is stream the Pacific jet into California and eventually into the southern United States. That can promote cooler and wetter winter months for Alabama, and that's exactly what NOAA's official winter outlook calls for. But it doesn't always work that way. In fact, we've had several strong El Nino events in recent history. 1972-73, 1982-83, and 1997-98 come to mind. Temperatures were about normal. Precipitation was pretty normal too. But we have noticed an interesting trend here. In the next few years following a strong El Nino, the number of tornadoes actually increases. That may be something we need to watch as we head into next spring. So bottom line, what does it all mean for us? Well, we could be a little cooler, we could be a little wetter, but there's certainly no promise of a wild, or quiet for that matter, winter ahead. And remember, wetter does not necessarily imply snowier. We'll leave that hype for our friends up north. For the WSFA First Alert Weather Team, I'm meteorologist Eric Snitil.